The nesting vlogs are officially over. My baby has arrived and I'm so excited to share his birth story with you all today. We're filling out his birth certificate information in between contractions.
So we got like 2 more minutes to do this.
Yeah, probably like 30 seconds at this point. We just have a baby. Yeah, what's his name? It's perfect.
Really smooth.
Yeah, it does. Now, he came a little early. I was 38 and a half weeks pregnant. I did not expect to go early. Most first-time moms go late. I was actually nervous about the possibility of an induction because of this and the pressures that come along with that. So I was pleasantly surprised when he came early. I was so excited. I even had some things on the calendar that I thought I'd be able to make it to that I just obviously did not, but that is a-okay with me. He came at the best time and the time that he was meant to. And it was actually really funny because that evening I had went to dinner with my parents, grandparents, aunt, and husband, and they were all sort of taking bets on when they thought he would come. And a lot of people were guessing way far out. And it's so funny because that night I had some bleeding, which I was really nervous about at first. I called my midwives immediately and they said it was most likely a bloody show, which is actually a sign of cervical ripening, which is actually a good thing. So as long as it wasn't accompanied by pain or a lot of blood, it was a good sign, but they wanted me to come into the office the next morning just to be sure. So when I went into the office, they did a cervical exam and they offered to do a membrane sweep. Now the cervical exam did determine that I was dilated and very effaced. So obviously I did have a lot of cervical ripening. Tying back into the bloody show, it made sense. So no cause for concern there. And while she was there, she offered to do a membrane sweep. Now, this isn't something they do a lot in midwifery care. They often don't do cervical examinations at all, just because they don't really show anything and they can, be risky earlier on. So it wasn't something that was commonplace, but I was a good candidate for the membrane sweep because I was showing signs of early labor and, it really moved things along, or it could have. And it sure did. So after the membrane sweep, the midwife said, go get something to eat, get your hospital bags in the car, be packed and be ready. And, you don't need to time any contractions today if they don't feel timeable, but just, do your best and hopefully we'll see you soon. 2 weeks before I went into labor, I remember texting my friend, I think he's going to come early, just because I was feeling a little bit crampy and I had a backache, but it wasn't the typical pregnancy backache where that comes from the weight of carrying the baby. It was a little bit different and something I hadn't really felt before. So I thought maybe it was like sort of some signs and some pain associated with really, really early labor. So I just thought, maybe he is going to come early. And then sure enough, on February 23rd, Sunday, I began to have my first sign of early labor that was really definitive. So my husband and I went to a First Watch for breakfast and I began to have really kind of intense contractions and they were very definitive. I knew what they were. And I was able to get through breakfast. It was totally fine. But by the time I got home at 11 a.m., I started timing them because they were coming in very regularly. And I found out that they were 8 to 9 minutes apart at first for a few hours. And then by the evening time, they were 5 minutes apart. And we called the midwife and she said, really, it's not a big deal until they're 4 minutes apart or shorter. So, they began to be 4 minutes apart. So we went into the hospital and once in triage, they began to slow down again. So good thing for me because my midwife said, why don't you go home again, try and fall asleep. I know it's going to be hard, but try and fall asleep as much as you can throughout the night. So I did just that, and I was able to get an hour here, an hour there, and really get a little bit of rest. And we're close to the hospital, so I felt totally comfortable doing this. The goal for me was to labor at home as long as possible. You usually labor better at home where you're comfortable, and you can avoid a lot of unnecessary interventions if you don't go to the hospital early. So the midwives really encourage you to stay home as long as possible. And I am so grateful for that last night of rest in my own bed before labor. So early the next morning, I had a regularly scheduled midwife appointment. So I went in, and pretty much immediately they sent me upstairs to labor and delivery, because I was in labor at that point. I had been in labor, but I was starting to become in active labor. It was like, that gray area. They weren't really sure. But as soon as they checked me, it was still only 3 centimeters. So unfortunately, they had to do something to move things along, especially because the contractions were so regular, so timeable, and so intense, but I wasn't dilating. So they gave me a really low dose of Pitocin, and they broke my water. And breaking my water and the low dose of Pitocin really got things moving for a while. I went from 3 centimeters to 7 centimeters, and this is all while laboring naturally. I felt a lot of spinal pressure. That was like my big thing, and leaning over on like a ledge or the bed while my husband pressed directly onto my spine was the most helpful for me at that point. And then I was able to get in the shower and labored there while I was 7 centimeters for a while, which was also really helpful. And then once I got out of the shower, unfortunately, things slowed down again. I remained at 7 centimeters, even though I was contracting so heavily. They were coming on top of one another, so I couldn't really tell, I could tell when they would peak, but I couldn't tell where one ended and began, if that makes sense, because I wasn't having relief in between them. And I wasn't able to breathe through them as well as I had been when I went from 3 to 7. And I had so many pain relief methods going for me at once. I had a birth comb in my hand. I'm surprised there's still not indentations from it. I had a TENS machine on my back, which sends electromagnetic pulses to your muscles to sort of like an acupressure thing. It does pain relief by giving you a little bit more pain, but it was really effective. I don't think I could have done it without the TENS machine. And then my husband was still applying a lot of spinal pressure, and my mom was pressing on my feet. And they were doing this for probably 4 hours. I didn't know, I had no concept of time, but my husband said, I didn't talk to you for 4 hours. And he was so amazing. I think he went to the restroom like once this whole time. And I just don't know what I would have done without him and my mom. Like, they were just the best. My husband was so encouraging. I cannot say enough about my experience with him in the labor and delivery room. So unfortunately, after laboring like that for a long time with all those pain relief methods, with a peanut ball in the bed, I was not able to breathe through them. It was really, really difficult. I was having a hard time relaxing through them. I would try to just open mouth moan, but I was not dilating anymore, and they had to do something. So what they did was they tried to dilate me some more by having me push, and then the midwife tried to use her hands to dilate my cervix. Unfortunately, that did not work, and while they were doing that, they also had to empty my bladder with catheter. It was extraordinarily painful. I kind of hit a wall there, and it didn't work. So that was just so discouraging. So they started talking about pain relief methods to up the Pitocin so that they could to, really move things along, because it was getting too long at that point, and we have to make sure that the baby's okay and everything. So they talked about analgesics at first. I didn't want to do that because it affects the baby. And then they talked about an epidural, which I obviously didn't want right away. But I knew that if I was going to have one, I wanted to feel sure about the decision. So I had a safe word with my husband. And if I said the safe word, I was getting it. But if I didn't, it was just a moment of weakness. So I listened to the anesthesiologist talk about it, and I felt very comfortable getting one. I just felt like it was the only way to move things along. So he gave me one. Honestly, getting the epidural was not scary. I didn't think it was scary at all. It's, it's like a shot, and it's not a big deal. You don't even see it. Just, stay still and breathe through it, and it all works out. I felt so confident in the person who was doing it. He was just so competent and confident, and just a really nice guy. So I felt really good about that. I felt like I was in good hands and in good care from everyone there. And boy, was it a good thing that I got that epidural, because 2 hours later, I was ready to push. I was fully dilated. They were able to up my Pitocin so much so that I would dilate, and also the epidural helped my muscles relax. So I just, kind of got out of my own way, and labor finally progressed. I still felt pressure with an epidural. That's totally normal, but I was not in extreme pain at all. Not even close to what the super active labor was like unmedicated. So I just felt really good about the decision, because baby got here real soon. And once I was ready to push, he came within 45 minutes, which is a really short pushing session for a first-time mom usually. I was just so excited, and my midwife was so wonderful at directing the baby and everything, that I think that was so successful. And I will never forget one of the nurses, she just, at one point, she was like, "Get angry." And, I did. That really worked for me. And he came very quickly. It did not feel like 45 minutes to me. It felt like maybe 10. And he was on my chest and crying and being sweet. And it was the hardest thing and the best thing I've ever done.